Hello and welcome, Inspired Podcast community. This is your new episode. My name is Caroline, and my today's guest is Marty Strong. And I'm so happy that you said yes to our interview. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Caroline. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm fantastic when I see you, when I meet you, beautiful people from Portmatch. I love that. And I'd like to introduce you to the audience. You are a retired Navy SEAL officer, former UBS portfolio manager, and current CEO of a middle market healthcare company. You serve on the boards of Best Robotics Inc. and Metal Raptor LLC, and you are the president of Best Mind Lab. You hold a BBA, MBA, and you are a certified master black belt in Lean Six Sigma. I hope you pronounce it that way. In Germany, we say, yeah, Six Sigma, right? I hope
Yeah.
so. Then you are the author of 9 novels and 3 business books with articles featured in CNBC, Fast Company, CEO World, and Chief Executive Magazine. Welcome to the Inspired Podcast, Marty Strong.
I gotta shorten that bio, that intro. Maybe I'm using up too much of your valuable time.
No, I worked on your, yeah, this is your bio, and I have one first question for you. How has your experience as a Navy SEAL influenced your approach to leadership and change management in the corporate world?
Well, the distinction between military leadership and operations and commercial operations and leadership kind of fall into one or two major categories. The first one is when you're in the military, everybody has to show up. They have to be led. They can't just quit and walk away. There's usually some kind of a term of service. So you have a little bit of a captive audience as a leader in the military. And at the same time, at least in the U.S. military, everybody's a volunteer. So they're a volunteer when they join the military. They're a volunteer if they join the Navy and made that choice. They're also a volunteer if they want to become Navy SEALs. It's an all volunteer program. So they can leave the SEALs and go do something else in the Navy, but they have to volunteer to get into the program. So that's the military side. The leadership is distinctive by rank and uniform. It's easy to recognize when somebody's walking around. Where in the commercial side, it's you don't have a captive audience. Anybody that works for you can just walk in and put a note on your desk or send you a text and say, see ya, and walk away. And you're suddenly scrambling, trying to figure out how you're going to fill that gap. The, um, the leaders aren't necessarily always recognizable. They don't wear uniforms. They're not distinguishable in that way. And so there's some positional authority and I guess prestige and expectations on the commercial side, which are based just with titles and titles of people you may never even meet or see. Where in the military, the leaders try to get out and get among the people that they're leading so that you see who they are, you recognize who they are. What's the value of that? Well, we're all human beings, we're all social animals. We all like to see who's supposedly calling the shots and directing us on what to do. So I think you can bond a little bit tighter if you know who the leadership is and they walk among you and talk to you, as opposed to more of the structured civilian world. Now, smaller companies, sure, you're going to know who the person is who's in charge. But that's probably the biggest distinction. So trying to convey what you learn in the military, especially as a SEAL, is more about the interpersonal relationships, the motivation and inspirational drive of a leader who's basically got a captive audience of volunteers that really want to do a really good job all the time and they can't leave. And you try to come over to the commercial side and you try to convince everybody not to leave through all those mechanisms of leadership that you learned in the SEAL teams.
Yes, I understand. And then they leave, right? If you are not a good manager or leader, then they leave. People leave managers, of course. And I never thought of it that way when you pointed out the differences between the two. It's true. You recognize you at once when you are in the military, or yeah, and you as a leader, of course, and you have assigned people to you, and they cannot escape. You said they join on a
Mhm.
voluntary way, but then they cannot escape, and the others leave you a note, and then they are gone, and you have to fill in the gap, of
Right.
course. this is the challenge, right? So my next question would be, what do you prefer?
Oh, well, there are two totally different human organizations. One's dedicated to safety, security, and defense. So there's kind of a higher purpose, kind of beyond the individual. So it's not about how much money you make, because you don't make a lot of money in the military, and it's not that you're trying to pad your resume with what you're doing right now, so you can then transition to the Canadian Navy in 2 months. You're not trying to figure out how to, work the industry and work your marketplace for your next gig. Um, and that part I like. That part that I like. The fact that if somebody is hurt or retires or something, the Navy immediately just pops up another person just like that. Here you go. They're fully trained, ready to go. Or on the commercial side, if somebody walks out, you've got to start from scratch. You've got to go find the people. You've got to vet everybody. You've got to look at all their resumes. And then you're taking a chance on whether when you hire them, they're going to come in and be as good as the person that left. So I prefer a lot of the aspects of the military side, but the challenge on the civilian side is that there's no higher purpose. It's a job. They're paying their bills with the money that they're paid. Somebody else can just wave some more money at them and they're gone. Doesn't matter how good a leader you are. They can say, look, I just need that. That's a better deal for me. And if you can't match that, good leader or not, you lose them. That was a hard thing for me to get used to. That you put all this energy and effort into building a team and getting everybody focused and moving in the right direction, and somebody could just walk out because they were paid an extra, $10,000 a year and say, see ya. So that's the only downside, I think, on the commercial side.
Okay, I understand. Thank you so much for sharing. So there's a lack of people. When you say in the military, at once there's another one with the same skills, so to say, in the same rank or so. Yes, and in the corporate, there you have to hire someone first. It takes a little time. Or
Mm-hmm.
yes. Okay, let's have a look at another. What key lessons have you learned about creative thinking from your diverse career across military, finance, and healthcare sectors?
So there's a lot of movies and TV shows about SEALs and special operations professionals, and it tends to focus on the kinetic, guns and bad guys and doing push-ups and lifting weights and doing all those kinds of things, right? Climbing mountains, and that's all part of the job. But the actual selection process for most special operations people has to do with high intellect and high creative capability. The reason for that is the only reason there's such a thing as the special unit is because there's a conventional unit, a conventional tool that can't do the job because the challenge, the task at hand is not conventional. And the best way to think of that is, like a Mission Impossible movie where somebody comes into a special unit and says, here are the facts, here are all the assumptions. We've never faced anything quite like this before. Figure out a plan. And that's what makes a special unit special. So they have to sit down, and there is no football play. There is no set pattern of how to do this. There's small amounts of that around some things like logistics, but basically you get into a big room and everybody just starts throwing their ideas up on the board and see what sticks. And as an officer, you tend to play conductor to that orchestra. You try to get everybody to put in their energy. You let everybody express themselves freely, regardless of rank or experience or anything. And you get the best ideas you can possibly get. And then you kind of pour that into a mold of mission planning. And then that's basically how you do it. So I spent 20 years doing that and being around that and watching really good creative leaders figure out a way to pull the very best, draw the very best out of their people. So when you get into the civilian world, the problem I've run into, and my third book, Be Different, is kind of focused on that, is that adults are not given allowance for creativity or innovation. They're basically told to do what you were taught to do what your resume says you can do what your degree says you are supposed to be doing. Don't go wandering around focusing and looking at other people's work and other categories of the business, because you're wasting time. You should be focusing. And that focus basically draws their brain down into this little straw, perception of the world. their market, their job, the people around them. And if you get about 100 people like that, they're all walking around kind of looking at the tips of their toes all day. And if they ever come up with a creative idea and raise their hand, 9 times out of 10, somebody goes, "Put your hand down. That's not your job. You're not senior enough in the organization to come up with an idea." And unfortunately, that just permeates commercial life. That's the way companies are run. That's the way governments are run. The good news, though, is brain science shows us that there's no biological reason why a 50, 60, 70-year-old can't be as creative as a 6 or 7-year-old. It's all trying to unlearn this conditioning that society and institutions have placed upon us and just kind of shake that off and say, all right. So as a leader, being experienced at creative engagements and in solution design as a SEAL, then coming over and realizing that this is not something that just fades away as you get older. I know how to kind of reinvigorate that, reignite that in older adults on the commercial side.
I understand what you said. So you described the process of idea seeking and finding in the military, so that there's a mission, a project, and everyone is throwing their ideas on the table, and there is no blueprint. So you work with the ideas of the people. In the opposite or the difference to the corporate or the civil world, you said, is that people are not paid for giving their ideas, so it is not seen as special or valuable. Yes, let's say valuable, and therefore, and this is the difference, and also the challenge. Of course, they mute or they get mute. They don't dare to express their ideas, and then comes personal development into play. I think you did not mention it, but when this is where where you develop and you realize that you are at the wrong place, maybe.
Well, yeah, that's unfortunate because I think every place would benefit from having an environment where there was a lot of free exchange of ideas. If everybody knows a little bit about everybody's job, you create social and human empathy. If everybody figures their job's the most important job, then you end up with that stovepipe kind of channeling of energy, and everybody, that's somebody over there and that's somebody over there, and we're not part of the same group. To give an example, there's a team working on a project and there's a deadline and they have to get it done by Friday, 5 o'clock in the evening or something. And there's other groups that have a lower load that week of work, and they're rolling out at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the afternoon to go take a long weekend. And they're leaving these poor people in the conference room trying to get it all done by themselves. They don't even go in and ask, how are things going? Or can I get you, pizza or buy some food for you and bring it in? Or there's no empathy. It's just my job's done. My team's responsibilities are done. I'm out of here. And that's a learned behavior, and it can be unlearned. And I think all organizations would benefit from changing the way that people think about their jobs and the people around them, and about ideas and innovative thinking.
Yes, absolutely. It's about balancing workload, I would call it, and also like about culture diversity and learning from each other, and competition, the opposite of competition, not thinking what's in for me, what do I have to do, what am I paid for, and then leaving everything what's not your business, so to say. Okay, I have another question. Of course, can you share insights on how Lean Six Sigma principles can drive transformation in a rapidly changing business environment?
Okay, so my second book, Be Visionary, the subtitle is Strategic Leadership in the Age of Optimization. And I call it the age of optimization because in the last 15, 20 years, mostly because of software that's enabled our ability to measure the past, there's been a focus and then eventually an over-focus and over-reliance on historical data. So if you can imagine, everybody's all excited about the fact that they have dashboards on their computers and they see exactly how things have been going, but it's all in the rearview mirror. What they're not thinking about is what's going to happen tomorrow or next week or in 6 months. And so everybody starts to get a very close-minded point of view. And this is taught in colleges as the way to manage. Well, again, you're managing, 1 foot at a time, and you're not looking up to see if a train's about to hit you, or you're not looking up to see if there's a great opportunity just right there ready for you to seize because you're so focused on the past. Now, Six Sigma, which is, a method of measuring, minutely measuring how many errors occur in a series of steps and processes. That's essentially what that is. But even though it started as manufacturing and a production technique for quality assurance and quality control, it actually works great with human performance. And human performance, I mean human processes. So the baking of the cake, so to speak, from the very first step to the very last step. Every time that somebody hands the process off to somebody else, how did that exchange go? How long did it take? And if it took a long time, then the case is going to take 3 weeks because there's going to be little gaps in between every step. Six Sigma would come in and look at that and say, there's got to be a smoother way for the two people to mesh at that point of exchange. And they should know a little bit about each other's phases in this thing, because my handoff will be smoother if I know what you're looking for when you go to pick up my handoff, and I should know what's coming my way. And this is all communications, and it's less about nuts and bolts and building things, and more about observing human behavior and sculpting human behavior along a standard linear process so that everything goes in the order and it comes out with a high quality. Now, to your question, how does that help you, in crisis or when things are going crazy? Well, the classic case is expansion, contraction, or surging of a business. So let's say good things are happening instead of bad things. And you've got processes and you've got systems and you've got software and you've got supply chains you're relying on, and you're clicking along and everything's written down and everybody's trained. All the managers are happy, no complaints. All of a sudden, the marketing department comes up with an idea and they put out a bunch of advertising and your sales shoot up 45% like that. Well, somebody's got to produce whether it's a product or a service. Somebody's going to has to track it from the finance standpoint. What you have is you'll have this big like shock wave that goes through the entire company and through every system and every process, challenging that status quo. So what Six Sigma can do, and that approach I described earlier, is if you anticipate that, know that's going to happen, you build into your training that this is what we're doing while we're in this state. But if we suddenly find ourselves accelerating, we're going to have to rethink this whole thing, do it all maybe from scratch, maybe just have a couple of phases redrawn, but we're going to have to do it in very, very rapid fashion. So the more you understand what we're doing and how we're doing it and why we're doing it, the easier it's going to be for us to get into a room and rethink and reimagine this whole thing in a crisis, whether it's a good crisis or a bad crisis. And then once you've done that and you've lived through the crisis and you stabilized again, you write it all up, you make it part of your training, you sit back and you go, okay, you wait. So it's really surge forward, consolidate all the processes and systems, lock them in, make sure all quality control is in place, get ready for the next shock wave. That's essentially how you can mesh the two.
I understand. I think you described the scaling process from small to big, and that everyone is prepared and also willing to do the work, right?
Yeah, I've lived through it a few times, so it's easy for me to remember.
Okay, thank you so much. I have one last question for you. What is your next project? Do you write another book or what is it?
So my third business book, Be Different, is set for release December 1st. So it's available now on Amazon for pre-sale, but anybody can go there, go to my website at martystrong.com and find that information on all my books, but also the newest one coming out, which is about creativity, innovation. I just finished draft one of my 10th novel. So I'm working on, every morning I'm working on editing and cleaning up and tightening things up for my second draft. And then probably at the end of this month, I'll send it off to an editor. So yeah, when I'm not writing, I'm trying to market and expose people to my writing. It's just kind of back and forth. That's what I tend to do.
Oh, I love it. I love writing as well and reading, of course. I'm curious for your next books. I put it on the Inspired Choice Amazon list. I created a list for the books of all of my podcast guests, of course. And please, people, reach out to Marty. He's amazing. He has information that not many people have. I learned so much today. Thank you so much for being in the Inspired podcast today.
Thanks for having me, Caroline.
Thank you and see you in the next episode.